Oh, testing. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Looks
Potato
good on my
chips.
end. Yep, looking good there. Todd, I know you said something, but you talked under me, so.
Potato chips.
Oh, yes. No smart food today.
No smart food.
Sorry.
So this is going to be a dumb show.
You get what Aldi gives you.
It's bleeding patrons left and right.
More like dumb food, am I right? Hello and welcome to another episode of Embassy Exclusive. This is a monthly supplemental show for fans of the VG Embassy Game Music Podcast. I'm Ed.
I'm Joe.
I'm Todd.
And each month we get together and share video game music, the latest news in gaming, and our hard-boiled opinions on both. This is episode 55 for March 2024. We hope everyone enjoys it.
And if you don't, you can listen to our soda bubbling.
Yes, we have extremely carbonated beverages today. I don't know why. They were literally bubbling over the top of our cans. That's not a euphemism. It's Easter weekend. We had a nice Friday off today, 3-day weekend, which is nice.
Days off are the best.
Yep. You guys doing anything for the holiday? I'm not religious, but my mom is, so we all get together for Easter for her, basically.
My folks are in town for a couple of weeks. We're going to see my sister for Easter brunch on Sunday, but nothing crazy or
That's cool.
out of the ordinary.
It's just a nice reason to get together.
I'm not really religious either, but we usually have dinner.
Yeah.
Like, not geared towards any particular, like ceremony or anything like that. Just, like, that's kind of what you
Just
do.
Easter. You get to do a ham or whatever and live it up. Drink too much, go to work on Monday hungover.
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
Pretty much how it goes.
Exactly. So, not really an Easter show or anything, even though I might be releasing this on Easter Day. My topic is related to Easter, but we'll see that at the end of the show. But we've got some fun stuff to talk about at the top of the show. Todd is back from his yearly trip to PAX East, and I see you've brought an armload of stuff with you. What are we looking at?
Yeah, my PAX East was last weekend, as of this recording, and I go every year. I've actually been to every single PAX East.
I don't think there's a year. Well, maybe, they didn't have it.
They didn't have an East 2021.
Yeah.
2020 happened like the week before everything shut down.
Yes, I remember that.
And it was actually when people were starting to get nervous about stuff, but at that point, everybody thought that washing your hands was going to be sufficient. So, PAX East happened, and there were definitely 60,000 people in that building, and COVID was definitely a thing at that point. Although, as far as I know, there was no actual, cases reported on that particular event, even though, the next week is when basically everything started shutting down.
That's nuts.
But I do recall, a lot of hand washing. They had... The BCEC had staff out cleaning the escalator handles and stuff all the time, and there was definitely a little bit of paranoia, but definitely not the level of paranoia that we should have had.
I remember, January going to MagFest, and it was a blip on the radar. People were mentioning that something weird was happening in China and whatever, but it was like one of those bird flu things where it's oh yeah, it's happening everywhere else, but it'll never come here.
Yeah,
and then,
right. January was when we weren't really worried about things yet.
Yeah, but it still existed. So that's nuts. So what'd you see? What'd you do?
So Thursday, it's a 4-day event now, has been for the last few years, but Thursday is by far the best day to go because there's the fewest number of people there. Most people show up on the weekend, which makes a lot of sense. So Thursday, there's basically nobody. You can go onto the show floor and do just about anything without any trouble. Pardon me. So that's I basically spend Thursday on the floor, and then we were there only Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We skipped Sunday this year. And the rest of the time I'll do classic console or go to panels or maybe check out some board games or what have you, but Thursday is floor day, and I have the thing that I do on the floor is I don't touch the controllers. I'm not really much of a germaphobe, but at PAX, I kind of become one. I don't really play test any games. Because those controllers are grody. And so I observe. I watch other people play the games, and if I like it, I pluck one of their handy-dandy little cards, and I have a small pile of them.
Nice.
To report to the two of you and anybody else who cares to listen. The first is called Lone Star. It is a game that looked very much like Faster Than Light, which strikes a particular chord in my heart. And if that's a game that you used to like playing, perhaps check it out. It looked like it.
Neat.
Another Pint is a game kind of like... what was that game that you wanted me to play, Joe, where you play like a merchant and then at night you go and...
Oh, Moonlighter.
Moonlighter. It's kind of like that, except tavern instead of like an equipment store.
Okay. Oh, neat. Okay.
Infernax is a...
That's been out for a while.
It has it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'd never seen it before, but it's kind of like...
It's
like
a limited run for Switch. It's a great game.
Well, never mind. It seems like a Castlevania clone type of a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful. I really liked it.
Okay.
Well, is that like a sequel, or is that that's been out for 3 or 4 years now?
No. They had a sizable booth, and like they had a couch that people were sitting and playing. And I didn't remember ever seeing it, so maybe they're just like continuing to hype it.
I'll lend it to you if you want
cool.
to play it.
Yeah, I'd like to play it. The Transylvania Adventure of Simon Quest.
Oh yeah, that looks good.
Which is just basically Castlevania.
Yeah.
The name and everything is very on the nose.
It's a little tongue in cheek though. Castlevania.
It's a little tongue in cheek.
A little bit of parody.
It looked very good. Again, didn't play it, but like I watched somebody else play it for a little while. And is something I'm going to keep my eye on.
Let me see that.
Oh,
I want to check that out. That actually sounds like it'd be up my alley.
I've seen this for the last couple of years. Toxic Crusaders looks like a pretty good like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade style beat 'em up type of game.
Yeah.
And also a game that I saw a few years ago, Iron Meat.
Yes.
Had a pretty big showing there. So
the demo was amazing.
I don't know if it's actually out yet.
I don't think it is.
If not, then I'm guessing it's nearing release because they had a much larger booth than they've had in the past.
They had
and they were really hyping it up.
They had a playable version of that at Retro World Expo too. They had a little tiny booth set up for it.
It purports to be like a Contra clone.
Yeah, exactly.
Memories Reach says a puzzling Metroidvania adventure, and it's kind of like it's a Metroidvania, but with like more modern sort of first-person 3D controls. I guess.
Oh, okay.
Maybe like Portal. I'm not trying to.
Metroid Prime, maybe more like.
Maybe something like that, but it's more geared towards puzzles and not fighting. So
gotcha.
it's a Metroidvania, but you solve puzzles to progress in the world.
Neat. Okay.
Which looked good to me.
Sounds like something I'd like.
That's right up my alley too.
And a game called Paladins. That's Paladins, but with a B, which looked a lot like Paper Mario.
Oh,
and looked interesting to me. So those are my top picks.
Oh, like ballad, like musical, because it looks like the B is a staff.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's got some.
Bring
some
joy
musical,
to a bright fantasy world in this role-playing adventure for 1 to 4 players. That's cool. Coming out in 2024.
We'll have to check out the trailers for these.
Neat. Yeah. Do they have any like big AAA game booths set up?
Yeah, like Nintendo is there and stuff like that. Square Enix had a booth. There was a lot of Final Fantasy stuff. I largely like avoid those because that's where most people go. You'll never get in.
Right.
The lines are immediately.
Yeah, I learned that the one time I went there.
So I walk by and I look. Actually, the Nintendo booth is really just Pokemon stuff this year. So I kind of shrugged and moved on. They have larger booths for that kind of stuff. I usually don't pay a lot of attention to them. I'm usually paying a lot more attention to the smaller and indie stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, the year I went was just ahead of the first Splatoon release, so the lines were like an hour long just to like get 15 minutes on that game. So
right.
Not something I was interested in to begin with, and not something I've been interested in since. So I spent my time better elsewhere. But cool. Sounds like you had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's good. It's always a good time.
See any good like bands or anything?
Well, Chipzel played, and a little bit more on that later, which was a great show. She really killed it. That's all that I saw. Unfortunately, a number of years ago, they got rid of the jam space, which was a room where like there were some scheduled shows, but otherwise people could just kind of show up and start playing stuff. And I wish they would bring it back because that was a place that I liked to hang out when. Like on Saturday when the floor is destroyed and there's a lot of people around, I would go and hang out in the jam space and just see what's going on. So I wish they would bring that back, but it's been gone for a few years now.
That stinks. I like the way that remember when they used to do it at Retro World Expo? They had the bands playing in the same room where all the arcade machines were set up, but it was still in Wallingford. And it was cool just to be able to like sit there and listen to a live band while you're like rocking some Final Fight on an arcade machine. Like that's a really good combination of things to experience at the same time. Cool. Yeah, in my experience.
PAX used to also have an arcade similar to that. They didn't have live music, but they definitely had like loud 80s music. It very much had that like 80s arcade feel. They did a great job with it, but the
say like living in an 80s movie.
Yeah, exactly.
The organization that brought in all the games either like I think it was like a not-for-profit, like a museum type of a thing, but they ceased to exist or just didn't want to do it anymore or whatever, but they stopped doing it. And PAX paid another organization to bring in arcade games for a couple of years, but it just wasn't the same. And so they gave up on that too, unfortunately, which that was another thing I enjoyed doing. But oh well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, Retro World Expo would like ask people to volunteer their arcade machines for like a free pass for the whole weekend, which I would not do if I owned an arcade machine, but I guess some people didn't mind doing it. So there's usually a pretty good arcade.
Right. I mean, like, do you really want a bunch of randos beating on your arcade machine?
I mean, if you like fixing them up, then you can, I don't know, let the hit points go down and then buff them back up again.
I mean, you can get all the buttons and the joysticks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe it's not that bad, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I would feel about that.
Not me, sir. Definitely not. What about you, Joe? What you been playing this month?
So after I finished Final Fantasy 16, I've been bouncing around between a lot of different things. My next big game is going to be Elden Ring, but I'm not ready to start that yet. I went back and played some Final Fantasy 6 Pixel Remastered, just because that's a guilty pleasure for me. It's not even a guilty pleasure, it's just a pleasure for me. It makes me happy. So I go back and I play that every now and then. I went back and played Final Fantasy 3, the original Final Fantasy 3 Pixel Remastered, just because that's the only one of the original ones I had never beaten. And I find myself, because I don't have a nostalgia for it, I find myself very bored by it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, it's not holding my interest. It's too simple by today's standards, or at least by my gaming standards, for me to be excited about it or get into it. If I had loved it, as a kid, if it were here, I'd probably think it was great, but it's not doing anything for me.
Well, it's a very early game, so they were still working on that stuff. I think, from what I understand, like 5 was the first one where it just really got into like deep storylines and.
4 is pretty close. I would say like it's definitely got a more in-depth story.
Yeah, and
than the first 3.
And the original one is just one that I love from playing as a kid, so I'll always go back and enjoy that, even though it's probably not any better, looked at objectively.
Right.
But so I did that for a little while. Then I wanted to try a new mobile game because I'm getting a little bored with Marvel Snap.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
I still play it, but not like it's the obsession's, I'll say, worn off, and I accomplished what I wanted to in it, and I still have it on my phone and play it every now and then because I have a couple of friends who play it, and I like to talk to them about it. When there's like a new card or a new mechanic or something fun.
And you didn't even have to go to weekly meetings.
Yeah.
Wean yourself off.
It's like I said, when I'm addicted to something, I know what it takes to get me through it. And it's the unhealthiest thing. It'd be like, it's the equivalent of trying to, beat a cigarette addiction by smoking every cigarette in the universe.
Right.
I'll be done playing Marvel Snap when I beat it.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
As long as I beat it, then I'm okay.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that for sure.
I beat it, and then that made the obsession go away, and now I play it a little bit. But I started playing. I wanted to play another mobile game that I could just sort of boot up anywhere, play for a few minutes at a time, like when I'm at work or when I'm waiting to pick up my kid or something like that, or if I'm just sitting on the couch. And I'm not into. I had people recommend Pokemon Go to me, and I'm just not into Pokemon. It's just I am a little too old for that. I think it came out when I was not of the age for it to appeal to me.
Same.
I played the original Red and Blue when they came out, and that was as far as I went with it, and it was fine. Like I get why people like it. I've played other Monster Collection games, and I like they're fine, but Pokemon never did it for me. So I found on a list of games like Pokemon Go a game called Orna RPG. Are either of you guys familiar with it?
Never heard of it.
It's a straightforward turn-based RPG where wherever you go in the real world, you can fight different kinds of monsters and find different kinds of items and things like that. And so far, I kind of only played it from like my couch and my desk at work and like a couple of other random places, but not. I don't play it like on the go, and it's not augmented reality based the way Pokemon Go is, but you can go anywhere in the world and like there are different items to collect and different monsters to fight.
Okay, so it takes your basically GPS coordinates and maps it to a thing in the game,
right?
More or less. Okay,
and you get all sorts of like quests where you have to find certain kinds of monsters, or if you find like a wooded area, you have to collect, like different types of like woods or stones or things like that, or if you're, so it's I'll say loosely connected to the real world. But the actual battle mechanic is simple. You just sort of, it's a simple like turn-based RPG, but it's fun to, I'll say, like collect items and craft weapons and to upgrade them, and it's mindless. I'm not playing it for an amazing story or anything like that, but I'm giving it a try.
It's cool.
I'm hoping that I could find some other people who are into it that I could talk to about it. Otherwise, I'm going to move on from that one pretty quick.
I wonder if you could like use a VPN app on your phone to like change your location and get global stuff.
I wonder. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I wouldn't see why not.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, so I'm playing with that a little bit. I wish it had, I'll say there's some music to it, but I wish it had more or better music, and then I'd probably like really be into it. So that's what so I'm playing that, and then I'm playing one other game that I chose my track from today, and I'll talk about it when I get to that. And that one I'm having a blast with, and I'll talk about that shortly.
Looking forward to it. Todd, we didn't really talk about anything that you've been playing this month.
I finished Haiku the Robot, which is a Metroidvania. Joe, you would probably really like it.
I've had that on my list for a long time. I just never got around to it.
Not incredibly difficult, but very well done. I mean, I don't think it like breaks any new ground as far as Metroidvanias are concerned, but I enjoyed it. Two games that I picked up at PAX that were very short, and I played through actually just like yesterday and today. One's called Ever Forward, and it's kind of like a stealth puzzle game. Actually, Joe picked up a copy too. They were selling copies pretty cheap, so I grabbed a couple of them. And one called Goodbye World, which is basically like a visual novel, but it actually does have a gameplay aspect of it. It's the story of two people that get together and want to make games together. It actually reminded me of like a video game version of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, if anybody's read that book. And while you're going through the story, occasionally, like one of the characters picks up her ostensibly Game Boy, and you play a level of the game that they're making while the story is going on.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was very short, maybe a half an hour, 40 minutes, but a fun little story, and a fun little like super retro like Game Boy type platformer game that you get to play while you're going through the story. So
These are Switch games?
I got these on PS5, but they're available on all kinds. I think they're on Steam as well and other platforms. And I still have not finished Final Fantasy X. I am at the final boss, but I keep like letting myself get distracted by other stuff. So I'm like right there. I'm sure I will have it done by the next time around.
Cool.
Other than that, I'm kind of between stuff because I've been playing these little games on my PS5. That's about it.
I love just getting kind of lost in a whole bunch of indies. Sometimes they're just... when you can get through them quickly like that, you can sometimes just find really good ones, and then if some of them suck, that you're only with them for like an hour or two, so you just get through them and move on.
Right, exactly. I'm looking for another lake. That's what I'm doing.
Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't played much like that since, but if I do find anything, I'll let you know, because I'm definitely...
You guys both need to play the indie game that I'm playing that I'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay. Alrighty.
I'm so hooked.
One of you talked about Islets, right?
That's me. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's another Metroidvania.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to play that next because it just went free on Epic Game Store. So I grabbed that. So once I finish what I'm playing now, I might do that.
Is it still free?
Yeah.
I'll have to
they do a free game a week, and it's this week's free game.
Oh,
so,
cool.
Go grab it.
I'll do that tonight then.
So I talked about The Long Drive last month. I finished that a couple weeks ago, maybe like last week. Put over 100 hours into it. Finally finish it. Had a blast. And then, kind of like you, like I was obsessed with it. Like I would just go home. I was like, I can't wait to go play, figure out, see what's coming up next. Got all the way to the end of the road. There's no ending. Like the road just ends and it's done. And that's when you know you've won. So you take your screenshot and you save it in whatever file you want on your computer, and that's your end. So then I started a new one, but this one's going to be like a more casual one. Like I already know how the game works, so I'm going to try to start as well as I can and just try to build a whole bunch of the vehicles that I didn't get to build like as I was going through originally. This will be more like the goofy experiment kind of one, because it's a big open sandbox world, more or less. So having fun with that. And then I started Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, which is friggin' amazing. So Deep Rock Galactic, I guess, I don't know much about the game, but it follows a team of 4 dwarves, but they are they're like all kitted out in battle gear and stuff. It's a science fiction game. So they go to different planets and they basically mine for materials, and that's the gameplay loop. Is that you mine for materials, you fight off these bug aliens on the planets. You get as many materials as you can and go back to the ship, and whatever money you make, you beef yourself up and do more. So Deep Rock Galactic Survivor takes place in the same universe, but you only control one of the 4 dwarfs. I think the original one is more like a resource management kind of strategy type of game. This one plays like if that game were a Vampire Survivors game. So you get dropped off on a level, there's rock formations everywhere, there's bugs everywhere, and then your weapons auto-fire, and the bugs drop blue things that you pick up, and when your level increases, you do the Vampire Survivors thing. It lets you pick between 3 or 4 different buffs or weapons or whatever. And but it's cool. It's much more linear than Vampire Survivors is, because each stage that you pick has 5 different levels. There's 4 levels of mines, and then the last level is like a giant boss. So you basically go through as much as you can. So you're trying to beat the enemies, plus you're also chipping away at these rocks and like going through these rock formations, finding like veins of like gold and different materials. And when you build these things up, then you can use them to buy buffs in between your runs. So it's fun. It's much more linear. It feels more like a stage-based game than Vampire Survivors does. You can use, each of the different dwarves, and they all have, one's a tank, one's uses the weird weapons, one's the smaller, more agile one, and 4 different mines that you can go into all have varying themes and different things that can, hurt you and harm you and stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun. I've got about 10 or 12 hours into it. I think the Dyad told me about it, and he's been playing it too, so I got to talk to him about how his games are going. But it's fun. Oh, he's playing Balatro right now. Oh, that's a game I want to play too. It's kind of like Solitaire meets Inscription. So I'm interested in playing that one. I know I've seen he's been playing that a lot on Steam, so I've got to talk to the Dyad about Balatro as well. I've seen some articles about it too, saying it's pretty addictive.
I've gotten links in my feed or stories in my feed about that. And I wanted to tell you about Inscription. I got really into it, got all the way to the end, and then my game glitched.
Oh, no.
I was on what I believe to be the last segment of it, and the game would shut down every time I went into a certain screen, and I couldn't figure out why. So I just kind of grumbled and moved on.
That sucks.
Yeah. But I had my fun with it. Once I got into it with the right mindset, I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
So thank you for encouraging me on that.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, there was a lot more than what I was talking, or what you thought there was when you started playing it. So, good. I mean, you could always just watch a YouTube video of the last little bit. And
that's how it went down.
Yeah. So, and it's got a good ending too. So it's worth seeing for sure. But yeah, so other than that, haven't been playing much else. Like I said, that's like 120 hours of my gaming month right there between last Long Drive and Deep Rock. So yeah, I'm looking for some more indies to play and trying to figure out if I'm going to keep playing Long Drive or not. I have a bus right now. It's slow as shit, but it just runs everything over. So I kind of like it. Yeah, so that's cool. We are going to move into our topics and our music now. As usual, we'll start with Todd. What are we playing today, sir?
My track for today is Finale from Dicey Dungeons. This has been released on just about everything, starting with Windows, Linux, and Mac in 2019, and as time progressed, all kinds of other stuff. composer Chipzel.
Oh, speak of the devil.
Welcome back. That was Finale from Dicey Dungeons, released on everything starting in 2019. Composer Chipzel, of whom I am a fairly recent fan. I saw her perform at PAX, and she did all Game Boy stuff, like straight Game Boy stuff.
Oh, you were in heaven.
And she killed it.
You had a case of Chiplash.
I had a case of Chiplash, that's right. She killed it, but when while she was performing, she was like, has anybody played Super Hexagon? And I'm like, I played Super Hexagon. And she's like, well, here's a track from it. I had no idea that she had done the soundtrack for Super Hexagon. So I was like, what else did she do? And then Dicey Dungeons came up. My wife had been playing it for quite some time. And I did not realize that it was a Terry Cavanaugh game who also made games like VVVVVVV and Super Hexagon. So it was just kind of like converging worlds, like all of a sudden. These things all just started coming together like while I was at this concert.
That's funny.
So I have not yet played Dicey Dungeons, but watching my wife play it, I think I do want to give it a shot. And Joe was talking about it while we were listening to the track.
Yeah, it's great. I played it a couple of years ago. I was all about it for about a month. Had a blast, and I had an extremely lucky run after about, like, I'll say 15 hours of playing it, maybe 20 hours of playing it, and beat it. And then I said, okay, I'm good now. And moved on.
Yeah.
Had I not, I'll say, had an extremely lucky run and beat it, I might still be playing it now.
I was going to say, some say that Universe's Joe is still playing that game to this day.
Yeah. So yeah, it's worth it. I recommend it to both of you guys.
Cool. I'll check
I'm
it
looking
out.
forward to it. My topic for this month, however, is stolen from a PAX panel. I went to a panel which was talking about the CDI Zeldas. And it was they got the guy who did the background art for the levels in the games, and they got the guy who did the voice of Link.
Oh wow! Okay.
For the Zelda CDI games, and both of those guys were like, we haven't thought about this game in 30 years. Like they were talking about how it was like literally just like a game that they were just they got a phone call one day and they're like, hey, do you want to like do a Zelda game? And they said sure, and so they just like made something.
Right.
They knew nothing about Zelda. They don't play video games. They just like, okay, here's a game, and now we have the CDI Zelda.
That's funny.
Well, I mean, they were part of a team that did it, but it was an interesting talk about like why they are so bad and how they came to be and all of that. But towards the end, one of the moderator or whatever posed the question to the panel that I'm stealing for my topic.
I love it.
Which is if you could take a bad game that deserved more of a chance in your mind, like a game that you really wanted to love but had just like a fatal flaw, and make it better, what would the game be, and what would be the change that you would make? And for me, what immediately came to mind was Quest 64. I've talked about that game on this podcast several times. I won't go through the entire story about how I came to own it again. Listen back on past episodes if you care. But I still want that game to be good, because I just bought it sight unseen and it was not good. But I actually played it for about an hour today to like so I could speak what I will call intelligently about what is wrong with it. And I was like, maybe there's just like one major flaw, like just one thing that made it bad that I could say, like, if this wasn't the case, it would be a good game. No. And it is bad from beginning to end. There's really not much to salvage there. So that one kind of went out the window. But I got another idea, and that is Brutal. What's the game with Legend? Yes, Brutal Legend.
Oh yeah.
It was advertised as like this open world, like metal themed game, and Jack Black was on there, and like I was pumped for the game. I bought it like day one. And then it turned into an RTS. And never before, at least to my knowledge, before its release, was it talked about being an RTS. And I don't like RTSs.
Yeah.
So I played maybe the first 2-3 hours. I don't know how long it takes before it becomes an RTS. Loving the game. And then it's just like, okay, so now like control your armies of like stagehands and stuff to go and like fight the enemy. And I'm like, what is this? And I pretty much immediately stopped playing.
Yeah, I bet.
And I would very, very much love if that game was not an RTS.
I think from what I remember reading, a lot of folks just thought like, oh, this is like an interim bonus thing where like you're going to play an RTS and then go back to the first person action or the third person action stuff, but it kept going and
it just kept going.
Like,
yeah,
never ended.
yeah. No, I didn't play it much longer to find out, but yeah, from what I understand, it basically stays an RTS at that point.
That's ridiculous.
And so no, please like stop being an RTS. Just be an open world, awesome metal themed game. And that is my answer. How about you guys?
Mine is, for me, very obvious. The game gets a lot of love from people, but not from me. I'm thinking of Red Dead Redemption 2. I wanted to love this game. I love open world games. I thought the Western theme was just going to be amazing. I bought it, and I would change one thing about it, which for me just made it not playable. When I play a huge open world game and I'm getting ready to like go into a hornet's nest and like take out all these different enemies, I like to plan it carefully, like have my items ready, have my guns ready, have like everything good to go, and then I want to save it. And I want it saved like right outside that battle so that I can choose to go in different directions, or if I mess it up, I can reset it and try it again and play the same scene 100 times if I want. Red Dead 2 doesn't let you do that. It saves it in the vicinity of something. You can't, like, I want it to freeze the screen exactly as is, and then that's what I want a save state to be. But it doesn't do that. It saves like in the vicinity. So if I was like hiding behind a tree, waiting time, trying to time when a guard walked by so I could like poke around a corner and take him out, you can't do that with this game. You have, like it'll either set you way back or it'll set you, like,
that's why Grand Theft Auto is too. You basically end up at the nearest hospital whenever you die. So, and it's similar.
That for me, that if I could change that one thing about the game. Also, the load screens, I played it on PS4, were just awful. It just took forever to load up every single screen in that game. But I mean, that was just a hardware limitation, I'd say. But yeah, if I could make Red Dead 2 have save slots the way like most other games do, where you're literally like freezing and unfreezing the game exactly as it is, I probably would have put 200 hours into it.
Okay.
And I couldn't get past that because that's just how I play those kind of games. And that just killed me because I wanted to love that game. I really wanted to love the game. There were a few other things about it I didn't like. I thought the controls were kind of clunky as well. And maybe it was because I didn't give it enough time. But the save state thing, I'll call it, that was the fatal flaw for me. So if I could have changed that one thing, I would have loved the game the way everyone else in the universe seems to.
Fair enough. That makes sense to me. I'm going to go a little classic with this one and talk about the Super Nintendo Super FX games like Stunt Tracks FX and Dirt Tracks FX. I think they're great games. Their fatal flaws are just bad frame rate and kind of janky action because of that. So, fixing the frame rates on those games, and it's been done quite a bit with Star Fox. There's the Star Fox EX project, which has been like absolutely like mind-blowing in terms of what they've been able to accomplish with the Star Fox engine. But Star Fox was not my favorite Super FX game. Stunt Tracks FX was. So I would love to see that game in... Don't even need to improve the graphics. Like, don't need to change anything about it. Just give me at least like a 30 frame per second
Just
race.
make it run the way it was intended.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it would be absolutely amazing. Like, I was really good at that game when I was a kid. Because I played it a lot, and it was a ton of fun, and it was my first 3D racing game ever. But going back to it now after playing things on, 60 frames per second and up, like, it's really, really hard to get into at this point. So, either a remake of the game with a decent frame rate, but, very close to the original graphics and stuff, or, like some sort of a hack that improves that stuff, I think would be absolutely cool. Fantastic for that game. Beyond that, the other thing I have is actually the answer to my topic, so I won't bring it up until we get to mine. Because our topics are kind of closely related, and I think they could be interchangeable for a couple of different things. So let's move into what our listeners had to say. Todd, you want to go first?
Chris Murray says, for the bad game that needs another shot, I'm going to go with Hogwarts Legacy. I just find it profoundly boring. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy games with fetch quests, relatively meaningless side missions for random NPCs, and other generic RPG tropes like this, but Jesus, this game just needs to pick up the pace. I spent several hours playing it, hoping it would grab me, but I just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore, because I wanted to do something else, something fun. As far as changes go, I don't have much meaningful or constructive feedback or guidance other than make it more fun faster. All right.
I have not heard much about. Well, I heard a lot about it when it first got released.
Yeah, when
and then
everybody was going
nothing
crazy
after.
over it.
And I think maybe everybody had the same opinion. It was just like, oh yeah, this is novel. It's not novel anymore, and now it's not fun anymore. And it just kind of got forgotten. So
when I picked up my PS5, it came with a copy of Hogwarts, and I haven't played it yet, but maybe now I won't.
Not a glowing recommendation.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I was considering popping it in at some point to give it a try, but maybe not.
All right, what do we got next, sir?
Ryan Steele says, bad game made good. Gonna go with an easy softball. Dark Souls 2. It's a cool world and the mechanics are fine. What's not fine? The awful co-op mechanics. The terrible enemy placement. So allow people to just connect together using matchmaking mechanics. Instead of making you wait 20 minutes to see a summon sign, that's also not consistent in when it will happen. Make a party, play together. Armor in that game is useless. You can wear nothing and die in 3 hits, or you can wear the best armor in the game and die in 3 hits. Yeah, that's true. The enemies do insane amounts of damage and are placed awful. They're always around corners so you can't see them, and way too many. Instead of making the game challenging in a good way, they opted for instant death. Many times you will go into an area and all of a sudden the 4 or 5 enemies will come out of nowhere. Make the enemies better, not just more of them. It's really just the basic concept of some games rely on cheap mechanics to make the games difficult rather than good game design. Making a boss have more health is not a good way to increase difficulty. So many games use the bullet sponge mechanic rather than meaningful gameplay.
Yeah, I understand that for sure. But it sounds like they made a better Dark Souls 2 by making Dark Souls 3.
Yeah, I mean, or Bloodborne.
Yeah.
I thought Bloodborne was pretty much perfect.
Yeah, the bullet sponge thing is a thing that always gets me because it's like when you progress through any sort of a game and it's like they don't make it so that you just have to have better reflexes or whatever, and they just make it so it takes more shots to kill the same guys that are behaving the same way they did on level 1. Like it just feels really lazy, and it just doesn't make the game any more fun anymore. So I completely get that one. I didn't know Dark Souls 2 had those flaws.
I put a lot of hours into Dark Souls 2, and I really liked it. I enjoyed, I'll say, having to memorize where guys were going to pop out of over time. And, they one-shot me a million times, but on that 1,000,001st time, I was ready for it. and it was very...
It's like Groundhog Day.
It was very satisfying, and I don't speedrun anything, because that's just not the kind of gaming I do. But when you get good at Dark Souls, you feel like a speedrunner, because you have to memorize so many things.
Right. The only way to do it is the most efficient way. Yeah. That makes sense to me.
So I really enjoy that. I don't foresee playing it again because there would be such a high learning curve to get over to get back into it and remember where everything jumps out at you. But I loved it. I thought it was a great game. But eclipsed by Bloodborne, which I thought was a perfect game.
Is 2 any sort of like a departure from 1 and 3?
Only in terms of the speed of the gameplay. If you were to go back and play the original Demon Souls now, it's like it's in slow motion. Granted, it was for PS3, and that was almost 20 years ago now. What was it, like 2006, I think?
Old.
2005?
It was a long time.
No, 17, 18 years ago. The game runs like in slow motion compared to the later games. If you play Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne or Elden Ring, which I'm going to get into soon, they run at almost a hyper speed pace by comparison. But the gameplay itself, like what you're trying to do, is very similar.
If I remember correctly, Dark Souls, I haven't beaten Dark Souls 2, and I didn't play that much of it, but if I remember correctly, if you beat the enemies like just in the world enough times, they stop spawning.
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I played it, but I really enjoyed it, and it definitely... I'm trying to remember the difference between Dark 1, Dark 2, and Dark 3, because I played all of them, and I loved all of them, but I don't remember which one had different spawn rules to it. I just remember that as I get into them and play them for 50, 60 hours, I learn how to memorize like where those corners are, where there's a guy that's about to pop out every single time. And if I, am ready for it, it's very satisfying to take that guy out.
That seems to be the way to play it, for sure. All right, interesting. So we've learned today that Joe thinks Red Dead Redemption 2 is a bad game.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I wanted to love it. I really did, because everyone loves Red Dead 2.
Ready the torches and pitchforks, everyone. They're coming for you. Sorry.
Fair enough.
I haven't played it. I'm sure I would probably like it. I don't know. I'm not a really big historical fiction person. I prefer sci-fi, so the whole cowboys and stagecoaches thing just never appealed to me.
I put down Red Dead 2, but I needed to scratch... So this was like 2 or 3 years ago. I needed to scratch that open world game itch. I picked up Biomutant, and I loved it. And it was just phenomenal, and I put, at least 100 hours into that, and thought it was great and loved every minute of it. So I love that. I love a big open world epic game, but I just couldn't get into Red Dead 2. I wish I could. And if that, like I said, that one flaw were not there, I had a few other smaller nitpicky things, but that was the one that just messed with how I play games the most.
Gotcha. All right. Makes sense. You want to move on to your song?
Let's do it.
Sure. What you got?
My track is Fox's First Mission from UnMetal. Released in 2021 for PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. The composer is Jaime Hidalgo de la Torre. And we're back. That was, at least in part, Fox's first mission from UnMetal, released in 2021 for the PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch, composed by Jose Jaime Hidalgo de la Torre. I found this game, I'll say accidentally. It popped up in my newsfeed. It's not something that I would normally play, but I'm so glad I did. This game is a blast. So it's called UnMetal because it's basically a light-hearted parody of the original Metal Gear for NES. Except it's got a very wacky, off-the-wall sense of humor. So you play as... The main mission is you're this POW trying to get out of this military camp where you're locked up. You've been falsely accused of a crime, and you have to escape. And that's the basic premise. And the guy is telling the story of his escape to his captor later. So I guess you're supposed to assume he gets caught again at some point. And he's telling the whole thing in almost the Usual Suspects kind of way. So he's telling a story and making himself seem like this epic hero the whole time. And it's all told in a very weird sense of humor kind of way. In one scene, he escapes how he gets out of his cell by pretending to hang himself. And when the guards come in to cut him down, he's not actually dead. And he, takes out the guards and steals their guns and escapes that way. And he's telling the story, and the captor says, "But where did you get the rope?" And the guy, and he goes, "Well, I'll tell you about that later."
Okay, yeah.
And every few minutes, at the end of the next chapter, the captor will say, "But you never explained, where did you get the rope?" "I'll tell you about it later," he says. And there's one scene where you go into the sewers, and you get to pick a bunch of points in the game, what's going to happen next. And at one point he goes, "And then I entered the next room, and there were," and you can pick from either sewer monsters or rats. And I clicked rats, and he continues the story. And all of a sudden, a portion of the wall break, and rats came out of nowhere. Man, they were looking at me like a big block of cheese. And then it cuts back to the guy's telling the story to his captor, and it cuts back to him in the sewers. And then all of a sudden he turns into a cartoon block of cheese, and the Benny Hill theme starts playing, and he has to waddle away from all these rats that are chasing him. And he's just a little bit slower than the rats. So you have to run it absolutely perfectly to escape the rats killing you. And the language that the guy uses is just so ridiculous and over the top. There's your main weapon is your fists. You have to either punch guys out or sneak up behind them and knock them out that way. But he enters one room, and he goes, "There were a bunch of guards in this room, and they looked like they were thirsty for some punch." And it's that kind of humor.
Yep, gotcha.
And it's absurd the whole way through, but it's a really, really good stealth game because every room or every chapter, I'm on I think chapter 4 or 5 now, has a completely different mechanic, and you pick up a couple different items that make it a little better, and you get a gun at one point, but nowhere near enough bullets to just shoot your way out. Yeah. And you can't kill people anyway, because if you kill a guard, the nurse who the guy has the hots for would be disappointed in him for making making all this extra work for her. So you can't kill the guards, otherwise you get a game over.
Gotcha.
So they build that into the story.
That's funny.
And so if you like that kind of sense of humor, this game is amazing. I'll say 15 hours into it so far, and I'm on chapter 4, I think, out of 6 or 7. So I'm more than halfway, but I'm having a blast with it, and I recommend this to everybody. I usually don't like stealth games, but I'm having so much fun with this one because the story is fun. I like the music, I like the gameplay, and I like how fresh each chapter feels because they open up just enough to make it interesting and to keep it from getting boring. So highly recommended. You guys got to give this one a try if you're looking for a small, kind of silly game, but with excellent gameplay. It's just the right level of difficulty.
Cool.
And fighting bosses is cool too. Anytime you get your ass handed to you by a boss, which will happen the first few times, they start you just in the room right before, so you don't lose your progress. Basically, you could just sort of do it over and over until you get it right. Or if you just want to run through it, change the difficulty level. But I'm having fun. I'll say challenging myself to beat the bosses the way you're supposed to.
That's cool. Sounds like a good balance of gameplay and story.
Yeah, it's great. So I recommend it to everyone.
Nice.
It leads to my question, because it's not the kind of thing that I'm usually into. what do you guys think about stealth games? What are your favorites? What makes a great one? It's usually not my thing. I never got into the Metal Gear games. I played the original when I was a kid, but it just wasn't my thing. I'm more about, I'll say, like, great preparation and finding a way to get either an item or a way to game the system so that I could just tank my way through something and feel proud that I, like, saved up enough items or currency or bullets or whatever it is to be able to do that. But in stealth games, obviously, you can't do that. It's designed to not let you. So I never got into Assassin's Creed. I never got into Metal Gear. I love The Last of Us, which is very much a stealth game because you can't shoot your way out of anything in that game. But I think that was mostly because the story is just out of this world.
Right.
So for me, this was a real change of pace. But I wanted to know what other people think. Are you guys into stealth games? If you know of any other ones like this one I just described, I'd be willing to give them a try. What do you guys think about this style of game?
I don't know of any that have the humor aspect of it. I mean, most games will have like a comic relief, a little something here or there that'll give you a chuckle, but nothing like what you're describing. I really enjoyed the Thief games, the original series from, I think, the late 90s. Is that one? Like Thief Dark Project? I think those were like 95, 98 games,
maybe. Yeah, between 95 and 2000, somewhere around
something
there.
like that. There's 3 of those, and then there's a reboot that was done in the early 2000s, I think, just called Thief. And they are very much stealth games. You can play them as like you kill everybody if you want. In fact, there's trophies for both like kill nobody and kill everybody. But really, I mean, the
1998. So you were right on the money.
So I was pretty close. But the whole kind of purpose of the game is to like get into an area, steal something, or kill somebody. Or take them out, as the case may be, and get out without being seen. And I kind of enjoy the like hiding in the shadows and watching like guards walk around and figuring out their patterns so that I can take them out without being seen. Like, it kind of sounds boring, I get it, but like, I don't know, that is an interesting mechanic to me, and so I like trying to figure out ways of non-lethally taking out guards, which is what you can do in Thief, or enemies, whatever, and in order to gain access to something or get something or whatever.
Oh, okay. The last time I really got into a stealth game was the original Commandos. I don't know if you guys remember those.
Oh,
from around the same time period.
Yep.
I played those in high school, and or at least the first one was the one I got into, and I'd spend like 2 hours on a level just to try to take out that one guard. And what you were describing, like watching a guard's patterns for like 20 minutes just to figure out like that, like just a few frames where you could like sneak out and like grab him without setting off the alarms was something I really liked the way it worked in that game, but I never, I'll say, got into it in any other one. So maybe Thief is worth a shot.
The Dishonored series is pretty good about that too. It's kind of the same idea, mechanic, with either stealth or kill everybody. You pick which, and it's more forgiving on the kill everybody approach. If that's what you want to do, you can do that. I really enjoyed those games too.
Cool. Yeah, I don't play stealth games. I've tried to play stealth games, and I don't have the patience for them. I just want to run through it like it's a action game, and I can't stop myself from wanting to do that. And so being stealthy is just an exercise in frustration for me. I remember, was it Deus Ex? I think I tried to play, and I like heard good things about it. Got it free on whatever store, GOG or whatever, and got through like this 25-minute tutorial and then finally got into the game, and it's like, now don't get detected. And I was like, God damn it. So that, and then System Shock, I think, is also kind of a very similar kind of game where that's all stealth based. Tried that one too. Bounced off of that one really hard. You might like the Hitman series because that is a good balance of action and stealth. You're basically you're a hitman. You're thrown into a level and you have an objective to assassinate a particular person. And you can go through it any way you want. Like, you can arm yourself up and go through guns blazing, or you can throw on the costume of, like, the server that's on the ship and pretend that you're a chef or something, and then, sneak your way up to them and either poison their drink or slit their throat, or there's, like, an infinite number of ways that you can, like, carry out each one of these assassinations that you're dropped into.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. They've been extremely popular, so... if you want to do like stealth, but then also want to like, today I just want to go action, like that's a good game where you can do it the way you want.
Maybe I'll give that a try too.
Yeah, I played a little bit of those and those are fun. So, but yeah, I don't really have much of a great answer for you on this one, unfortunately.
No, that sounds good. I'll look at Thief and I'll look at Hitman. Thank you both.
Sounds good. And listeners, if you guys have any suggestions for Joe, we can pass them along for sure.
Play UnMetal. It's fantastic.
Yeah, UnMetal looks cool. And then you didn't describe it, but it's like top-down pixel art, like very similar to the NES.
It
Metal
looks
Gear
and
Solid.
feels like the original Metal Gear.
Super cool. All right, so let's move on to our final topic. We've got... I told you mine was going to be Eastery. In the spirit of the Easter weekend, what are some game characters or series that deserve to be resurrected? And what would their new games look like? We're going to listen to Snow and Mechanica from Contra Operation Galuga, which was a resurrection of the Contra series, released just this year on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. This is composed by Eirik Suhrke, Yuko Komiyama, the Konami Kukeiha Club, and Norihiko Hibino. All right, that was Snow and Mechanica from Contra Operation Galuga, released just last month for PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, composed by Eirik Suhrke, Yuko Komiyama, the Konami Kukeiha Club, and Norihiko Hibino. Really nice kind of updated reimagining of the Snowfield tune from the original Contra game. And the game itself is a really good reimagining of Contra. And there's been a lot of attempts at Contra over the past 2 decades, but I think this one finally starts to get it right. There are still some flaws, but in the spirit of the Easter weekend and my topic, I think it's a very good resurrection of this series, and it's definitely heading in the right direction. And it's also really story-rich, so it's adding a lot more context and flavor to the world of Contra. So... if this game is hopefully popular enough to garner, a decent fan base, it would be cool to see them kind of expand upon this universe and start making some other games in the Contra world, that are as fun as this one is. So, it's good stuff. Now, in my topic, which was kind of like, I think, along the lines of Todd's topic as well, kind of like, if you're going to bring back a game, how would you make it different? These aren't games that necessarily were bad and then making them better, but games that just, they could have been very good and just the series kind of dropped out, and bringing them back might be good, but, there might need to be some changes made in order to like fit in with modern gaming aesthetics. So one of my ideas was to bring back Kid Icarus, but to make it kind of in the style of like God of War, whereas maybe not necessarily as adult as God of War is, but you've already got that grand scale of the gods and that kind of a thing. So Pit as a third-person action player, reliant on like ranged weapons like his bow, but then also has a sword maybe given to him by Palutena or whatever. I think it would be a really cool kind of and it's a genre that Nintendo doesn't really have an analog for. It wouldn't be as open world as like Zelda would be. It would be more of a linear kind of a third-person action game.
I was picturing it as not Zelda, but as an open world game, kind of like that game Immortals: Phoenix Rising.
Okay.
That would be, because that's about like Greek gods and goddesses. That would actually, a Kid Icarus themed game like Immortals, I think would be a blast to play. I'd really like that.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea too.
Did you see?
Sure.
Have you seen the 3DS? Kid Icarus?
But I know it was similar, but the controls really hindered.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I tried to play it and I basically couldn't because of the control scheme. I mean I don't exactly remember what was wrong with it. We're talking some time ago now, and I didn't.
Yeah,
play
it was that like the game actually came with a stand so that you could like use your hands in weird ways, so you didn't have to hold the 3DS while you were playing it. And a lot of it was flight based too, I think. So it wasn't so much like ground-based combat like I'm envisioning. Like, of course, it would probably be like maybe Panzer Dragoon style, like flight, where Icarus is actually, flying from place to place. That's what it was. I'm remembering more, and I didn't write it down in full, but it would be like a Panzer Dragoon style flight segment at the beginning of the stage where you're flying towards whatever temple that you're going to be beating this boss in. And then once you get to that temple, then it becomes more like a God of War, kind of on the ground based. So you did kind of have this refreshment of gameplay over and over again. And of course you get different weapons and abilities and stuff as you go. So I think that would be cool. And I think the Switch and or the next Switch successor, whatever, would be, it could work for that Panzer Dragoon style gameplay where you can move the unit around to kind of look in different directions and stuff. So there was that. And then there was bringing back Adventure Island.
Oh, man.
And I think it doesn't necessarily need to be like a big AAA game. Even an auto runner, like kind of like a fun like action mobile game style thing, I think might be cool, or like a caravan shooter kind of a thing where you have a certain amount of time to get as far as you can and get on a leaderboard or something like that. Because I've always felt like even though the original Adventure Island games weren't like auto-scrolling or auto-runners, it had that energy to it because your timer is always going down. Yeah. You had to keep moving forward. So why don't you just automatically keep moving forward, and you just have to collect fruits and stuff to keep alive, and like it feels like a formula that would work really well on those kind of mobile game aspects. So I was wondering if you guys had any ideas for games that could come back in different ways or just that need to be refreshed. Oh, the other one I was going to talk about was Bionic Commando, because the 3D Bionic Commando game that came out alongside Rearmed sucked. And I think if they made a third-person, could even be open world, but in a universe that's much more like the original NES Bionic Commando, I think that would go a much better way than the gritty 90s, everything is gray and olive green, brutalist kind of Bionic Commando that they tried to do back in the early 2000s.
If you're going to go with one of your all-time favorites, I'm going to do the exact same thing.
Nice.
I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit here. I want Final Fantasy Tactics 2.
Okay.
And yeah, I know they made a Game Boy Advance one. Yeah, I know they made...
That's still decades ago. So.
Yeah, and I know that there are a ton of tactical games in that vein. But for all the ones I've played, I haven't played one that's made me feel that good or scratch the itch in exactly that way.
Did you play the Final Fantasy, was it 12 or 13 DS tactics game that they came out with?
No.
It's DS or 3DS. It's oh geez, I forget what it's called.
Wait, no, yeah, I did. It's called something of the Grimoire, I think. It's called Tactics A2.
No. Well, that's not what I'm thinking of. But no. I know that there's several games of that kind of ilk. But yeah, there was a DS or 3DS game that was kind of like a side Final Fantasy 12 or 13 game, and it was a tactics game.
Oh. I'll have to check that out. But no, I didn't realize that existed. We'll have to look that up later.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the other one, which I would have said I would love, except it did get brought back a couple of years ago, is River City Ransom. They came out with River City Ransom Underground, which is basically a direct sequel.
Yeah.
And is phenomenal and scratched that itch perfectly. And then they managed to top that with River City Girls and River City Girls 2, which are even better.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great games.
So I have to say that was one that has been resurrected, and it was done perfectly.
Yeah, it's a good example of how to do it right.
Girls and Girls 2 and Underground are just... If you love the original, you have to play all three of these. They're just great.
Once again, I'd like to thank the makers of the Scott Pilgrim versus the World game for revitalizing the beat-em-up genre.
Yeah.
It was so dead before that, and then after that, everyone was like, "Oh, these are viable. This is a viable platform.
People
Let's
want
do
this,
it."
yeah.
And so many great games came out after that. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, good call. You're spot on.
Yep.
Like Toxic Crusaders.
Toxic Crusaders, and the Turtles game.
Turtles
I think
games.
there's a G.I. Joe game coming out that's kind of going to be similar to that
G.I.
as
Joe.
well, which I'm
Interesting.
looking forward to.
Wonder how did they dredge up that license and like get it
Nostalgia, man.
revitalized.
90s nostalgia is all the rage.
Yeah,
Hey,
I guess
if
so.
Toxic Crusaders can be there, I
guess,
G.I. Joe
yeah.
is even bigger than them.
Yeah,
so.
you're not wrong.
What about you, Todd?
I'd like to see another F-Zero, but I don't know what it could possibly be. I remember seeing something that Nintendo had said that they're not making any more F-Zeros because they don't know what they would do with it.
I think there was an interview with Miyamoto. Like,
Maybe
I finally
it was.
asked him, and he's like, "I'll do it, but I don't know how to make.
What would I actually do
How
with
do I
it?
make it better than what we did?"
But like, they're still making Ridge Racers, right? Like, there's not a lot of space.
This hasn't been a
for
Ridge
them.
Racer in a while.
Hasn't there? Okay,
Yeah.
I don't really pay that
What was
much
the last F-Zero? The one for GameCube?
GameCube, I think.
F-Zero GX, yeah.
Unless you count the F-Zero thing that just came out on Switch, where it's like 100
Well, F-Zero 99, but
players,
that's
right,
like
whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's really just like a
It's
modification.
an online version of the
original.
SNES
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, the GameCube one is kind of a perfect game.
Right, and
Yeah.
it's difficult
And I
to
don't know
not
what they
start
would do
making
with
it look like Wipeout, because
Yeah.
the more advanced you make F-Zero, the more Wipeout it becomes.
Right, exactly. So yeah, maybe that one should be left to lie. I think, despite Forever, which I haven't played, I think Duke Nukem could make a comeback. Like, Shadow Warrior is enjoying something of a renaissance, and it's similar kind of like crude humor. So I don't think it's like the Duke Nukem humor that is the turnoff here, and I'm not sure what it is, but like I think it might be able to have some kind of a comeback if it's done right.
It's pretty cringy, though.
That was the word I was going to use, too. It's like, it was cheesy back then, and now that cheese has turned into cringe.
Yeah.
So maybe like change the humor so it's not cringe.
Well,
anymore.
then everybody would complain that it's not.
There's no
there's like no
maybe,
good way to
alright.
win it.
Alright,
There's
so
always
then-
going to be half the
Either
people that are upset
satisfy
about it.
the alpha males that really want
Yeah.
that.
Plus,
that
it
in
was
the game.
very misogynist too. So
That's
to
what I
keep
mean.
that humor, bring it out in a modern game, you're going to have your fair share of detractors.
Or you
but-
take that away and people say it's not.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. Then I have no ideas.
Fair enough. With the Ghostbusters Renaissance going on, it would be cool to see another. Well, they did that remaster of the original Wii game that came out, which was basically like Ghostbusters 3.
I don't think I've.
You haven't. You should really check that one out, dude.
Okay.
Because
The only one I remember is
it was
the
written by Dan
NES game.
Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, and it's all the original voice actors. Like the
Really?
whole cast comes
geez.
back. It's a brand new Ghostbusters story
For
just
the
in
Wii?
video game form. It came out on Wii, PS3, and Xbox 360 originally, but then they remastered it for the next generation of consoles.
Oh, that's awesome! I'll definitely check.
Definitely check it out. Even and the gameplay is like basically third person, like Luigi's Mansion kind of stuff. It's catch the ghost, trap the ghost, different weapons and stuff. It's a lot of fun.
I watched a great video on YouTube last week about how the making of the original Ghostbusters movie could have been completely different. It's what's the name of that YouTube channel? I forget. It was a mini 20-minute documentary on the making of Ghostbusters and how it was almost a completely different film.
Oh, interesting.
I'll look it up later and show you guys. But I've had Ghostbusters on my mind for the last week since I watched that, so I'll have to
That's
check
cool.
that out.
Oh, that reminds me. I started playing Control as well, which is really, really good. That's a game that I'm probably going to have a lot to say about next month for sure.
Interesting. I kind of bounced off that one. It's weird how like all these popular games, we all have like very differing opinions.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not a huge fan of the controlled gameplay. I just really like the environment, and it feels a lot like Severance, the TV show, like very kind of similar to that, where it's like
I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. Anyways, I'm having fun with it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we've got some responses from our listeners. I'll start off with Mike Stark. And 11 says Commander Keen should make a return. Hopefully, a new Commander Keen game would play similar to the existing games, a challenging 2D platformer with goofy, cartoony aesthetics and a tongue-in-cheek sense of humor. I think Commander Keen could come back.
I love that answer. Yeah, I think that would be a great one.
Yeah, especially now because you'll have a combination of. You'll have, like, the dads that were, like, played it as a kid, and then their kids will be the right age to kind of rediscover it again.
Just don't make it, like, Kaizo nonsense. Like, it can be challenging, but not, like, ridiculously...
Or just have, differing difficulty levels. Or, there's a good spread where you can do, like, the kids mode, and then you can, like, have the bonus levels, which are the, Kaizo levels or whatever.
Retro platformers are in, though, so, yeah, I mean, that could be ripe for the picking.
Absolutely. Want to go to the next one?
Next up, the Dyad, who I believe, according to Ed's notifications, is playing Eichenfell at the moment. Great game.
While spying on you, Dyad.
1984 all over again.
Says, I absolutely do not know why this popped into my head, but I miss the Lemmings games. Oh, that's nice. Me too. That would be cool. And I think it would be fun to see them come back. I could envision it as a Pikmin-like 3D game, but with the sense of humor and irreverence of the old games.
There was a 3D Lemmings game. It was like late 90s, early 2000s PC.
Lemmings 3D.
No,
and it was for the original PlayStation.
Yeah, I think he's right.
No, I'm thinking of. I think it's called Lemmings Revolution. It was a PC game.
They made one after the.
Well, Lemmings Revolution could have just been an offshoot of 3D.
Maybe it was.
I don't know.
I haven't played the. What did you say it was on PlayStation?
I believe the original PlayStation, it was called Lemmings 3D. That was the last one I remember playing. I don't know if there's one after that.
Lemmings Revolution.
With the name Lemmings.
Lemmings Revolution came out in 2000. But it's kind of a side-scrolling game, but it's like, it uses like, it looks like it uses like, all the levels are on like a cylinder. So they wrap around and you rotate the cylinder, and it's got 2D Lemmings gameplay. Okay. Lemmings 3D is an actual like 3D game.
I see.
But original PlayStation 3D was kind of clunky, so I think a modern Lemmings 3D would be cool.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be kind of fun.
And instead of Pikmin style, where you're just trying to get stuff for your ship or whatever, the Lemmings would have actual different jobs in building bridges and digging underground and stuff. Yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
I feel like that has to exist in some other form or under some other name,
like a Lemmings fan game or like a love letter. Yeah, something like that.
I'm gonna look that up later and see if there are like love letters to Lemmings or something like that out there, because I feel like that's such an obvious thing to try at some point because it was so popular at the
obvious
time.
Thing, but probably difficult to make. I'm sure a lot of people probably tried to start making it and then were like, well, this is hard in 3D.
Oh, yeah, I guess. Yeah, maybe so. I'm still going to look it up, though.
Let's see. Todd, do you want to read Chris Murray's?
Yeah, Chris says, in terms of games that need to be resurrected, I actually think this is a difficult question in the era of remakes and remasters, but I'm going to go with Dragon Force for the Saturn. It's such a cool take on an SRPG model that I think it could do really well with modern technology, etc. I wouldn't need to... it would need to be a remake or remaster, but just a new Dragon Force game would be amazing. And there could be an amazing collab with the band. Shining Force.
That'd be awesome.
Shining Force making a return would also be amazing, just saying.
I've heard really good things about Dragon Force. Like, it's one of the best Saturn games ever made, but it's always been like something that I've never tried because strategy RPGs are just absolutely not my thing.
I've never heard of it before, and that is my thing.
It's like a very hidden gem in the Saturn library. So check it out.
I've been meaning to. I've been researching different ways of getting an ODE for the Saturn, and eventually I'll do that because the games are hard to come by nowadays.
Sure are.
But if I had the collection on an SD card, I think that would be how I would end up playing that.
Grab a Fenware. I can totally help you set it up. I'm pretty good at it at this point. Good idea. Red Who chimed in with a whole bunch. So he starts off with Star Tropics, the most obvious one. The fact that this game hasn't seen a sequel since the second game is a travesty. Yes, opinion on the second game is a bit divided given the move away from puzzles into a more action-focused game, and also the move away from, well, stars and tropics, with an emphasis instead on time travel, but still. This game absolutely deserves a proper resurrection with a return to the tropical aesthetic, an emphasis on celestial bodies, and the puzzle-oriented gameplay. And who knows, maybe they can make a Mike/Mika ship finally happen. Have you guys played Star Tropics?
I have.
Only the original, which I could never beat.
Absolutely brutal. I played both of them, but like the ending of the second one, spoiler alert, is kind of a boss rush, and I couldn't get past it.
I think we've talked about that on the show at one point.
Probably when I was playing them. It was only a couple of years ago.
Oh, forget it. I beat the first. No, I don't even think I beat the first one. I don't think I was able to, and I think I loved it as a kid, but I don't. It was too much for me.
Yeah, that was a Nintendo first-party property, right?
Yeah,
so they could
right,
make a sequel if they wanted.
They could, but what would they do with it? Like,
yeah.
Are you just going to make another like top-down straight Star Tropics, even NES style game? I don't know. I don't know if that's something Nintendo's into.
I'm sure you would. Well, unless they did like a pixel remaster kind of a thing, and then
yeah.
Well, I think not enough people talk about it now to get lots of people excited about it. I don't know if a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, I remember. Aside from us old fogies,
Nintendo loves to dredge up old things like that and like do something with them every once in a while, though. So
stuff
you never
that
know.
hasn't been seen since the NES days is getting fewer and more far between.
Yeah,
I think because that generation is definitely getting older. Us old farts getting up in our 50s at some point, so I don't know. Next up, he says, Fear Effect, criminally underrated cyberpunk game with an Asiatic aesthetic that plays like Resident Evil. This one particularly stings because besides the game being woefully overlooked, it was probably the studio's first success, and the game's visual aesthetic was just so unique and clearly a labor of love. Would have loved to see the OG team's plans for the cancelled Fear Effect Inferno. Oh, and we don't talk about Fear Effect Sedna. That game needs to be forgotten in a dumpster fire. Oh, okay. I didn't realize Sedna was bad. I remember, like, kind of being excited when it came out because that was right around the time when we had interviewed Matt Furness on Pixel Tunes Radio, and he let us hear the theme song he wrote for Fear Effect Sedna, like, before it came out. But then once it came out, like, I didn't hear anything about it, so... But that's a game that was like mostly full motion video, with kind of like a Resident Evil. Did you guys ever play Fear Effect at all?
No, not familiar with it. I mean, I've heard of it, but I've never. What's it? The original one for?
PlayStation. It's mostly like FMV meets like Resident Evil style exploration and action.
Okay.
Came on like 4 discs, so it was like a lot of FMV. But I mean, I guess. Cyberpunk world with Asian women is like, it's not going to stand out nowadays, so who knows? I mean, it might be good, it might be bad. I just don't think it's unique enough to really come back quite well. Next one, Command and Conquer Generals. Now, granted, I think it would be hard to do given how politically incorrect the original game is, those who know, and how much the political landscape and social norms changed since then. But this game easily had one of the best multiplayers of all time, and as far as RTS games go, real shame they never managed to recapture the magic of that game. I don't think you'd need to worry about, like, political incorrectness in a war game. Just don't make the countries like blatant copies of other countries.
Just call them something else.
Yeah, exactly. You can have 2 kind of nondescript warring factions and not dress them in ways that are reminiscent of actual living people.
See the Dune RTS.
Yeah, exactly. Give it more of a science fiction kind of a thing, or just make them Nazis because everybody hates Nazis. Next up, Breakdown for the Xbox. Given how niche the game is, there is a very fat chance of this being remade or resurrected by Namco Bandai, but this game's perspective was so unique, and it was probably the first game I played that involved fist fighting in first person. A remake with improved AI and some ironing out of the story would be amazing to see. Breakdown. I don't know if I've played that.
I'm not familiar with that.
No? All right. I guess I can't comment on that one too much.
Let's look that up later.
Fist fighting in first person sounds fun, though.
Isn't that Punch-Out?
Basically, I guess. Yeah. I mean, Punch-Out's still technically third person, but yeah, behind the dude. Next up, Beautiful Joe.
Ooh,
definitely.
Yeah, great call.
Forgotten Gem by Hideki Kamiya. Fun, quirky beat 'em up that I think would appeal to modern, younger audiences. Yeah, Beautiful Joe would be good. It would definitely appeal to the anime crowd. It's got that kind of cheesy action going for it. And I think...
Have I got the game for you?
Exactly. A Metal Gear styled game with scrolling done in a pixelated style. We never got a 16-bit Metal Gear game. It just jumped right into the PS1. Can you imagine a Metal Gear game with graphic fidelity of Eastward? That would be sick.
Go play UnMetal. Go play it right now.
That's hilarious. Number 7, this is the last one, a 3D Kunio-kun game. As I've mentioned it before, but I would love to see the OGs of Technos collaborate with the Yakuza developers to make a full-length, cel-shaded Kunio-kun game set in the 80s or 90s Japan, set in 80s or 90s Japan with the art style reflecting manga or anime from that period. So a 3D beat-em-up River City Ransom, basically. Which, yeah, I don't know. I mean... Maybe? I think the series should stick to 2D. I think it would lose too much in 3D. That's just my personal opinion. I think a lot of the character comes from the sprites. And I think moving that into more realistic people or, characters would kind of lose some of that magic. I'm
inclined to agree. Neat idea, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Redhua. That was a really good amount of stuff. And hopefully you've learned something and we'll go play UnMetal now, especially since it's really funny that we were just talking about that.
And we didn't read these ahead of time. Right?
No, not at all. I just copy and paste them. Usually I don't read them ahead of time. I'll do some grammatical cleanups if Google sees some stuff spelled wrong or whatever, but that's about it. So that's cool. All right, we've got something from Ryan Steele who wants to read his.
Quick side note before you do that. You mentioned Punch-Out. Another game I saw at PAX is called Big Boy Boxing, and appeared to heavily draw its inspiration from Super Punch-Out.
Cool.
Which has like the wireframe, fighter. It looked very, very much like Punch-Out. It looked very, very good. It didn't have a card, or I would have grabbed the card. Like
that's cool.
A lot of the show, like the developers didn't have cards this year for some reason. They just had QR codes.
Gotcha.
So I took pictures of a lot of them. But yeah, that looked really good. If you're a Punch-Out fan, it looked like it could be very good.
Sweet.
And back to the show.
And if you are looking for something in that vein, one of my favorite weird random games of all time is the Game Boy Advance Wade Hickston's Counterpunch.
Right.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not.
You've talked about it before because it's like a
kind of like an irreverent,
right?
Yeah, kind of. It's the UnMetal of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Kind of, except that it was the Game Boy Advance was it wasn't programmed well, so it's very kind of janky. If that could be done better, I think it would be an amazing. It'd be one of my all-time favorites for sure because I love the game as bad as the gameplay is currently. But it's this fun, random little like homage to Punch-Out with a weird sense of humor.
Cool.
Anyway, Ryan Steele says, he has risen indeed. Ganbare Goemon is a favorite series, yeah, I'm with you on that, from my childhood that has been dead for nearly 20 years. The IP has been dormant and has only been used for Konami's slot machine hellscape. A true revival is tough to say. Konami has been on a revival train these days with hollow games that use the name of their old IPs we love but lack any depth. They miss the point of what we loved about them in the first place. What the game should be requires a fresh perspective. Since Goemon games are top-down, some side-scrollers are 3D platform collectathons. The weird humor and Japanese folklore are essential to a new game. The N64 game had aliens who just wanted to put in a good show for their adoring fans. This quirky humor would for sure get Ed going.
Sure.
Now the mechanic. That's what Joe is waiting for. Got me. It would likely be an action platformer. The Goemon N64 game was similar to Zelda, as you had an open world, you could travel, and there were dungeons to explore. I think this should remain the same. Add in some better hack-and-slash mechanics or Souls-like combat, likely faster pace like Ninja Gaiden, add in some RPG elements, so Todd's a happy boy. Wow, he's really playing to the crowd on this one. You're not wrong. I'm getting drawn in. But the games typically let you control up to 4 characters. I would hope that this would remain the same. An instant swap between that let you cycle through the characters, you would know who to use at certain obstacles, with balanced upgrades along the way. Graphics-wise, if staying true to the original, it'd be cel-shaded, stylized, however, a gritty, dark reboot with absurd humor could be a very fun package. Kind of a Muppets Christmas Carol vibe. I like that. Where it's a serious movie, but with Muppets, which is inherently silly. Anyway, Konami needs to either make some games that are good again or sell some IPs. Amen, Ryan Steve.
Agreed. There was just a English.
met.
There's just an English translation released for the last PS1 Goemon game that never got released over here. So if you do want some fun Goemon games to play, you can go check that one out. I love the Goemon series and everything from the SNES games on up. I've played at least a little bit of them. Fantastic soundtracks too.
Yeah.
So I think bringing back some of those original composers and getting a good modern game going would be a lot of fun. Definitely.
Those N64 ones were hard to come by. I ended up when I made my N64 collection, the two Goemon games were really hard to get.
Yeah, and there's like a Mario Party style Goemon game too, isn't there? I think it's Japan only.
Yeah, not for the US N64.
Yeah,
there was just Mystical Ninja and what was the
Goemon's Big Adventure?
Yeah,
Great Adventure.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, definitely a series that needs to come back for sure. All right, Todd, Nemo is up next.
Nemo says, my initial reaction to this question was, hell no. Regurgitation of pre-existing IPs is one of the big problems with pop media today, highlighting a lack of creativity amongst content creators. While that hot take has some truth, it also doesn't give enough credit to creators who are coming up with novel and ingenious spins on what's come before. Anyway, after I stopped yelling at that cloud...
Get off my lawn!
I realized there probably are some IPs that I'd like to see revisited. The reason I'm not more gung-ho about it is that resurrections can be kind of a crapshoot. Even IPs that are much loved can be handled poorly, and IPs that I tend to love are pretty obscure and to most younger gamers today. The really obscure titles seem even less likely to get a good treatment. So, Phantasy Star, also Glovelus? Govelius.
Never heard of that one.
Neither have I. And Snake Rattle and Roll.
That'd be fun.
And Landstalker and Karnov.
Okay. Snake Rattle and Roll. Oh, there goes my alarm. Snake Rattle and Roll for a modern system. I mean, I guess, would it still be... I can't see that in... Well, I guess I can see it in 3D, but... It feels like it needs to be an isometric kind of a game.
I was going to say, the isometric for the NES was... It worked. It was perfect for its time, but honestly, I bet it would probably do pretty well if it were, I'll just say, like, updated. And so that the, I'll say hitboxes were a little more fair. I always struggled trying to climb in that game because I could never, like, wrap around a corner the way the game forced you to when you're trying to climb, due to the isometric nature of the play style. If they could make that better, I think it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I'm not familiar with Landstalker. Either of you guys?
Yeah, Landstalker's it's an isometric action RPG for the Genesis, I want to say.
That's probably why I'm not familiar with it.
I've never heard of Golvelius.
I think it's like a action, like a 2D side-scrolling action game where you're a knight of some sort. Hold on, let me Google that real quick. Golvelius video game. Yeah, it's a compile game released for the Master System.
Okay.
Back in 1988.
Someone was a Sega kid.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Nemo had a Master System growing up. I don't think he ever had a NES, so that's his nostalgia right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a little bit of contention about how he started it off, where it's like just lazy rehashing, but I think lazy rehashing is like, here's a new Tomb Raider game every year. That's lazy rehashing. Like, that's just slapping a new coat of paint or some new levels on an existing engine and trying to make a $60 or $70, $80 game out of, with $20 worth of work. But I think what we're talking about here is more like resurrecting, like, long gone, like really reinventing the wheel for these series, which I don't think is the same as not being original. You know what I mean? Like,
we don't want another one in the series. We want the things we loved about some game that's been long dead.
Yeah.
To feel again.
Right. We don't want to rehash. We want a new take on an old series. I think that's a good way to put it. But yeah, I think he got it at the end. So definitely Phantasy Star. Like, obviously, there hasn't been a Phantasy Star in ages, and people have been clamoring for that. I don't know if Sega will ever really get back to that. And if they do, they'll probably still go the MMO kind of route. So I don't know if that's going to be what people want, considering that's how the series kind of ended up. So very interesting. And then Justin from XVGM Radio chimed in. I think it's his first time on MSC exclusive, aside from like being an actual guest. But he says, one series I'd love to see a new entry in, even though it's highly unlikely to happen, is Gradius. I think the last game came out around 2010. While I know there have been plenty of similar games, there's just something about the music and the combination of power-ups that Konami like to use that I always enjoyed. I've never been a fan of bullet hell games, but Gradius was more of a shmup than anything, or at least the games that I enjoyed. As far as what a new game would look like, I think it would be neat to revisit some classic levels and bosses, as well as seeing some new terrain that maybe they haven't done yet. I always thought the bosses were interesting, if a little gross sometimes. There are plenty of wacky designs to tap and shot patterns to avoid. Yeah, Gradius has not seen a game out since 2010, and Gradius 3 was like one of my favorite SNES games ever. Fantastic soundtrack, and a lot of lore in that series as well. So I think that would be really cool. Even like a reimagining of the like the original games or the third game or something.
If they could
like
make
that.
a Gradius 3 without the frame rate issue that the Super Nintendo one had, I think that would be a...
Well, they've resolved that.
Did they? Oh. I'm only remembering playing it, 25 years ago.
Well, yeah, so they made a ROM hack of it where it uses the SA1 chip that like Kirby's All-Star did, and it pretty much removes all the slowness from the original Gradius 3 game, which is cool, but makes the game extremely difficult. And it's not something that I would recommend a noob playing at all. But still fun to see it like with all those glaring, obvious flaws fixed, which kind of is related to your first topic, Todd. Like, that would be a great game to get re-released, like, officially, with all of the slowdown. Removed a lot of those early SNES games that had a lot of that stuff going on.
And the show comes full circle.
Yeah, exactly. There's this, the guy who's been doing the Star Fox EX hacks, his name is Kandu Wantu, and he has also been converting a lot of the SNES ROMs, a lot of the slower... So, getting a little into the technical weeds here, but SNES games could be released in high ROM or low ROM format, and low ROM is basically like a slower memory bank, like it had less powerful like hardware in the cartridge itself. But the changing it to high ROM means that it basically increases the game by like 10 or 20% as far as speed goes. So a lot of games out there, it's very easy to convert the ROM from low ROM to high ROM. So he's been doing this for like hundreds of games where they were released in low ROM speed, and all you have to do is like get in there, know which bytes to flip, and then kind of converting it. So he's improving the frame rate and the performance of like a good probably half of the SNES library at this point.
Oh, wow.
So you just go in there and it's a regular ROM patch. You just patch the ROM, and then you can play it on your hardware with a flash cart, and you get a little bit of speed boost and extra frame rate out of your SNES game. So that was really cool.
That would solve the problem. Wow, cool.
Yeah. So it works really well in games like Rock and Roll Racing, which was one of my favorite games from back in the day. Terrible frame rate, but now it's very
playable.
much improved. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we had a lot of really good stuff to talk about on this show. A lot of really good things to check out, like UnMetal sounds really cool.
You guys got to play this game.
I guess so.
Another quick side note, that Final Fantasy Tactics game I was talking about is a DS game. It's called Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings. I looked it up.
Oh, okay.
If anybody cares.
I'll have to look into that. I don't think I'm familiar with that.
Cool. It's a DS game, you said?
DS.
Neat.
And it's a strategy game. I mean, I don't know how
Did Final Fantasy XII even come out on any Nintendo systems?
No.
Okay, so that's probably
except
why.
for Switch. They released it
later. Yeah, much later.
Oh,
but
okay.
At the time.
Not the DS era, right. Interesting. Okay, cool. We've learned a lot, for sure. I'm looking forward to telling you guys more about Control next month, and I'm hoping that, Todd, you finally beat Final Fantasy next month.
So do I.
Yeah.
I'm ready to move on.
Are you just basically like grinding to get good enough to beat the end, or
No. I think my characters are strong enough. I just haven't been playing it.
Oh, I see.
Because
Okay.
I've been, like I said, I've been letting myself get distracted with.
I thought you meant
other
distracted in the game with like side quests and stuff, but you're talking about distracted by real life things.
stuff by
Oh,
or other games or what have you. I just
Gotcha.
haven't been playing it.
I understand now. Makes sense. Well, thank you everyone for chiming in. You had a lot of really good opinions. Maybe we'll see some of these game ideas come to fruition in the future. Some of them have already come out and you guys just didn't know about it, so I thought that was really cool too. I want to thank Jason Letourneau, as usual, for our podcast theme song, and I want to thank all of our Patreon patrons, as usual, at the end of every show. At our tourist level, Cameron Shiles and the Phantomire, our VG emissaries, Periodical, Chris Murray, Get-In11, Keyglyph, Kyle Coral, Chris Murray, The Dyad, Professor Tom, and The Last Rican, and our audio attaché members, Cameron Worma, Carlito, Muddle Madness, Scott McElhone, and Ryan Steele. Oh, you know what? Speaking of Carlito, I think he, at the very, very last minute, put in an answer to one of our questions. Hold on. Let me completely derail the end of this show for a second.
Where were we again?
Where were we? Oh, yes. He says, answering your EE resurrection question, hope I'm not too late. You were just a little bit too late. He says, I will always hope for a return to Castlevania. Everyone else is making Castlevania games of all kinds. Why not bring the original back? I haven't tried that newer Contra, but plan to when I have time. It's pretty good. So try that out, Carlito. Hoping to see a proper Belmont swinging a whip around soon. Those Netflix shows have been well received, seemingly. Too bad it hasn't been a multimedia event. Happy Easter/Bunny Day to you all. Well, happy Easter to you too, Carlos. Yeah, everybody's always clamoring for a return to Castlevania. I think a game based on the animated series would be kind of cool. And I think that would kind of lend itself well to a 3D game if you were able to kind of like 3D-ify the artwork. In the series.
Are the sheer number of like Castlevania clones that are released seemingly daily not like a good enough scratch
but
to the itch?
That's the thing, is that they're just...
I recognize they're not actual
I
Castlevanias, but there's lots of great games.
For me, that's fine. But there are guys like my old castmate Mike from Pixel Tunes Radio, like, if it's not like, he'll play the non-Castlevania games, but it doesn't scratch the Castlevania itch if it doesn't have the name on the title, you know?
I thought Bloodstained came really close.
Yeah, I agree.
Both Ritual of the... what was it? They made a Symphony of the Night love letter, and Curse of the Moon was also a love letter to the original Castlevania, and I thought those were done really, really well.
Talking about Bloodstained, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that what I said?
That's what you said.
No, I didn't hear you say that.
Tom was not paying attention.
Yeah,
I was looking to see if the Transylvania Adventure actually said Castlevania on it, and it obviously does not. I was going to say, well, there's this, which is basically Castlevania.
Yeah, I think, there are games that are like, yeah, we're Castlevania-like, and then there are games like that where it's like The Adventure of Simon Quest. Like, come on now.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just very blatant in their similarity to Castlevania. So, and that scratches the itch for some people, and it doesn't scratch the itch for other people.
Fair enough.
Whatever. But I do think that, Castlevania game. I think that the difference is that people that are really into the lore of those games like them because it adds more to the story. Whereas like the Transylvania Adventure isn't going to add to Castlevania lore. It might be a fun game, but it's not going to give them more headcanon to explore, So there's that other itch that needs to be scratched as well. They want to see what happens to the old Belmonts.
Okay.
Yep. Anyways, we will see you guys all next month for another episode of Embassy Exclusive, and catch me in 2 weeks for another episode of VG Embassy. I still haven't come up with a theme, but it'll be cool. Whatever it is, I promise. It always is. So thank you guys, and we'll see you later.
Happy non-denominational day of reflection, everybody.
Bye.
What he said.